Good day, everyone. I am Adelson Villatero, and I'm here today to discuss to you about our research study entitled Coping Styles of Caregivers of Patients Both Infected and Affected with HIV/AIDS. This study is co-authored by my colleagues, namely Kathleen G. De Leon, RN Man, Ornes S. Santos, RN, Ferdinand A. Lazaro, RN Man, Celia O. Martinez, RN Man, and Doctor of Application. For the abstract of the study, this descriptive correlational study explored the coping styles of caregivers of patients both infected and affected with HIV/AIDS using the Jalowick coping style. Results showed that generally the respondents were male, below 30 years old, siblings of the patient, and college graduate. They have a very high level of effectiveness of the use of coping styles, confrontive and supportive. A level of effectiveness of the use of coping styles, evasive, optimistic, palliative, and self-reliant, and a low level of effectiveness of the use of the coping styles, fatalistic and emotive. No significant difference between the level of effectiveness of the use of each coping styles when grouped according to gender, except for evasive and emotive coping styles. No significant difference between the level of effectiveness of the use of each coping styles when grouped according to age, except for evasive coping style. No significant difference between the level of effectiveness of the use of each coping styles when grouped according to the relationship of patient except for fatalistic coping styles. And lastly, there is no significant difference between the level of effectiveness of the use of each coping styles when grouped according to the highest educational attainment. Keyword of the study are coping strategies, HIV and AIDS, coping styles, caregiver of HIV patients. For the introduction, coping occurs in response to life changes that are viewed as stressful, necessitating adjustment to usual demands or stressor. This process often requires more effort and energy than what is typically needed for everyday life. To effectively cope, individuals need a variety of strategies to manage problems or situations they encounter, whether perceived as threats or obstacles, by Fockman et al. 1986. As noted by Miriam in the year 2017, the way a person copes can significantly influence their ability to navigate stressful situations. It involves regulating one's well-being, which in turn impacts the coping strategies employed to address various challenges. This is particularly relevant for caregivers looking after patients affected or infected by HIV/AIDS. They often unexpectedly take a new role, which necessitates adjustment in their lives, affecting their schedules, work, social commitments, activities, and lifestyles, according to Lee et al., year 2018, Hansen et al., year 2017, and Aryan et al., year 2017. Caregiver utilize coping strategies to manage the physical, social, emotional, and financial demands related to caregiving, which play a crucial role in fulfilling their responsibilities. Unlike healthcare professionals, family and significant others, caregivers are often on call 24/7 and may have to juggle multiple and sometimes conflicting roles, according to Duforte, Berhoff et al., year 2014. A study by Moshek et al., year 2013 found that caregivers of HIV patients often manage symptoms through self-care based on their personal experiences, seeking information from health services, asking for help, and engaging in confronting activities to distract themselves from symptoms. In the Philippines, it is common for family members and friends to support each other during times of illness. Reflecting Filipino values and attitudes towards caregiving by Morillo et al. 2013, which are deeply rooted in Catholic social teachings by Ochoa et al. 2016. The researchers have observed caregivers employing various coping strategies while caring for family members affected or infected with HIV/AIDS. This observation serves as the foundation of this study, which aims to explore the effectiveness of coping styles utilized by caregivers of HIV/AIDS patients. Moving on, for the methodology of the study, it utilized a descriptive correlational design to explore the coping styles of caregivers of patients, both infected and affected with HIV and AIDS using the Jalowick coping scale. They were selected using a purposive sampling method based on the criteria set by the researcher as follows: that they are currently the caregiver of patients both affected or infected with HIV and AIDS, more than 20 years of age, willing and able to participate in the conduct of the study. Data was gathered using the revised version of the Jalowick coping scale. For the result, profile of the caregiver. Most of the caregiver respondents belong to 20 to 29 years group, male, college graduate, and sibling of the patient. For the level of effectiveness of coping styles, for the table 1, according to the Lowick coping scale, two coping styles that involve taking action to address the problem, confrontive and supportant coping, were found to be very highly effective with mean score of 2.26. These problem-focused coping styles, which involve personal confrontation and seeking social support, allowed caregivers to adapt more easily to stressful situations and make a positive impact on their own well-being as well as that of the patient. Coping styles evasive, optimistic, palliative, and self-reliant coping styles were found to have a high level of effectiveness with 1.64, 2.23, and 1.75 and 1.9 mean scores respectively. These high-level findings mean that they are effective but not to the greatest level and can be less effective sometimes. Here, the caregiver respondents try and use other coping styles to adapt to unchangeable stressful situations. From problem focus, they can switch to emotional focus coping strategies, which this time is effective in managing unchangeable stressors, unlike problem focused coping, which targets the source of stress. Emotion focused coping strategies focus on managing the emotional response to the stressor. This approach was found to be less effective, as evidenced by the low mean score of 1.14 and 1.27 for the fatalistic and emotive coping styles, respectively. For confrontive coping style, as shown in the table 2, the data reveals a very high level of effectiveness of confrontive coping style, with a mean score of 2.26. This suggests that the caregiver respondents found this approach to be particularly beneficial in managing their responsibilities. One reason for this effectiveness is that confrontive coping enables individuals to take swift action, which is essential when dealing with numerous challenges associated with caring for someone living with HIV/AIDS. These challenges include the unprepared nature of caregivers' role, which often requires significant adjustment to family work and social commitments, leading to financial struggles, stress, and stigma. For Table 3, evasive coping style, the caregiver respondents using evasive coping style with a high level of effectiveness, having a general weighted mean score of 1.63, this suggests that they successfully employ strategies such as distraction, denial, and venting to avoid stressful situations. However, despite their perceived effectiveness for this coping style, it also has negative consequences, supported by the items with low level of effectiveness such as item 18, 20, 21, and 56. Using evasive can increase vulnerability to stress-related issues and result in psychological complaints. This is consistent with previous research by Dorestian et al. Year 2019, which found that self-blame is linked to symptoms of anxiety, depression, and interpersonal sensitivity problems. For Table 4, fatalistic coping style illustrates the findings of high level of effectiveness of fatalistic coping style with mean score of 1.52. This means that the caregiver respondents presume this fatalistic coping style can be a positive approach, especially when they focus on taking action to address the challenges posed by HIV/AIDS to their patient. It makes them become more engaging in proactive and optimistic mindset, as this approach involves taking responsibility for one's own actions and seeking knowledge about the disease, which is associated with increased optimism and better psychological well-being. For Table 5, emotive coping style shows that there is a low level of effectiveness of emotive coping style with general weighted average score of 1.27. This means that the caregiver respondent rarely believe that this coping style is effective. This can be attributed to the fact that some people use emotive coping mentally disengaged from the situation by daydreaming or oversleeping or just giving up dealing with the situation altogether. It lowers their level of mental involvement and thus they feel temporarily less distressed, but it becomes a dysfunctional coping style quite quickly. That is why when the caregiver respondents are faced with challenges in life, particularly emotionally significant ones, they thought flow is dominated by those events. For Table 6, optimistic coping style shows high level of effectiveness of optimistic coping style with 2.23 as its general weighted mean score. This means that the caregiver respondents anticipated this coping style as effective. This indicates that they believe that optimistic coping style helped them to maintain positive attitudes about their problem. The highest and second highest items on the table above, items 50 and 54, supports the findings. These are about trying to think positively and trying to see the good side of the situation, with mean score of 2.61 and 2.53 respectively. This kind of attitude additionally directs the caregiver to view their caregiving role as an opportunity to show family love and mutual benefit, encouraging the positive effects of healthy family relationship and viewing life as a meaningful. However, there are times when caring is so taxing, their caregiver roles and responsibilities can become challenged. Thus, they must be aware that it can demand a more nuanced approach to providing effective care. And for palliative coping style, for shown in the table 7, displays the high level of effectiveness of palliative coping style with 1.75 as its general weighted mean score. These findings means that the caregiver respondents assume this coping style is effective. This can be observed in their choice of highest items from the table. Items 26 about using relaxation techniques which can decrease anxiety and depression while providing care in a wide range of activities. For the support and coping style, as shown in table 8, these findings is also supported by the highest item. 17, about praying or putting trust in God as a means of support to cope with daily activities as a caregiver, with 2.81 as its mean score, interpreted as very high degree of perceived effectiveness. The relationship with God give them positive meaning to problems that are faced while caring, which therefore cause them to rely more on using on-religious support to cope. For self-reliant coping style, shown is in table 9, there is a high level of effectiveness of self-reliant coping style, with a general weighted mean score of 1.91. This finding depicts that the caregiver respondents expected this coping style to be effective. This coping mechanism takes root when caregivers recognize that their patient needs and well-being are ultimately their own responsibility, and they must be able to adapt to changes in the amount, level, and intensity of the care demands. In becoming resilient, these caregivers acquired coping skills that allowed them to become more flexible, to respond to changing circumstances, to show humor, to release pressure, and to maintain hope, even if of the family members is infected with HIV/AIDS. This finding is also supported by the highest item, number 17, about praying or putting trust in God as a means of support to cope with daily activities as a caregiver, with 2.81 as its mean score, interpreted as very high degree of perceived effectiveness. Their relationship with God gave them positive meaning to problems that are faced when caring, which therefore caused them to rely more using on religious support to cope. And for the next slide, for the significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to profile. For the age, table 10 illustrates that significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to profile age. Data shows that there is no significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to age, except for the evasive coping strategy, which has a p-value of 0.008, which is lesser than the 0.05 level of significance. This significant difference is further elaborated in tables 11. And for the table 11, the significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to profile. Younger caregivers like 20 to 29 years old may think that they are too young and cannot change anything about their situation because they lack the experience or does not have enough experience on how to control their life as it's applied to specific situation and context when compared to those belonging to 40 to 49 years old. For the next slide, for the significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to profile, sex. Okay? The table illustrates that there is no significant differences. Determined by the significant two-tailed values, except for the evasive and emotive coping strategies, which has a p-value of 0.014 and 0.023 respectively, which are lesser than the 0.05 level of significance. Significant difference can be attributed to the use of emotion-related coping of women who usually use it more than men. According to the to Sinha and Lata, in the year 2018, women are more likely to use the emotion-focused coping strategies of acceptance self-destruction, and emotional support than men. And for the next slide, the highest educational attainment, Table 13 displays that there are no significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to the highest educational attainment as determined by the p-values 0.211, 0.195, 0.249, 0.321, 0.115, 0.898, 0.129, and 0.18, which are all greater than 0.05 level of significance. This can be related to the result in the previous table that most of the significant other caregivers were college graduates. And for the relationship to the patient, Table 14 shows that there are no significant difference between the degrees of perceived effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to the relationship to patient as determined by the p-value of 0.613, 0.053, 0.051, 0.512, 0.271, 0.296, and 0.272 except for fatalistic coping strategy which has a p-value of 0.002 which is lesser than 0.05 level of significance. This significant difference is further elaborated below in Table 15. In Table 15, it shows that the significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to the profile. It shows that the significant difference found above fatalistic coping strategies between others and sibling and that of others and son or daughter indicates that the person related to an ill family member will be different kind of caregiver than others. This is because the strong family ties that we Filipino have, the families usually have share or this same general orientation in life apply to specific situation and context. And for the conclusion, the following conclusions were drawn generally. The respondents belong to 20 to 29 years old group, mostly male, college graduate, and siblings, using the Jalowick coping scale. Confrontive and supportant coping styles were found to have a very high level of effectiveness, evasive and optimistic. Palliative and self-reliant coping styles were found to have a high level of effectiveness. Fatalistic and emotive coping styles were found to have a low level of effectiveness. There is no significant differences between the level of effectiveness of coping strategy when grouped according to age, except for evasive coping strategy. No significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to gender, except for evasive and emotive coping strategy. No significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to highest educational attainment. No significant difference between the level of effectiveness of each coping strategy when grouped according to relationship to patient except for fatalistic coping strategy. And for the recommendation, based on the findings of the study, the following recommendations were proposed. Number 1, for caregivers. Caregivers of patients affected and infected with HIV/AIDS should enhance their awareness of their circumstances, particularly in how they utilize various coping strategies and assess their effectiveness in alleviating stress related to their situation. For patients should encourage their caregivers to engage in the program for caregivers. This will ensure that the caregivers will be well trained and equipped with various coping strategies to manage stress, ultimately leading to more positive outcomes in patient care. For hospital administrators, hospitals leaders should work to elevate care standards that align with positive coping mechanisms and stress reduction strategies. And for future researchers, they are encouraged to use this study as a foundational resource and references for subsequent research endeavors. And in behalf of my team, I would like to extend my gratitude and thank you for listening. I'm Addison Begatara, and thank you.